From toxic action figures that turned zombie gray to Eric Estrada filming scenes from his hospital bed after a near-fatal motorcycle crash, the beloved 70s cop show CHiPS was far more bizarre behind the scenes than the sunny California highways suggested. The show's cast donated blood for real injured highway patrolmen. Bruce Jenner temporarily replaced Estrada during a contract dispute, and the Ponch and John figures suffered from zombie disease when their plastic heads turned sickly gray from toxic reactions. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about CHiPS, 1977. Fact 1. Eric Estrada filmed from his hospital bed. Eric Estrada's dedication to CHiPS went far beyond what anyone would expect from a television actor, especially after a motorcycle accident that nearly cost him his life in 1979. While filming a routine chase scene for the show's third season, Estrada lost control of his 600-pound Kawasaki motorcycle and was thrown into a parked car before the heavy bike landed directly on top of him. The impact was devastating, fracturing several of his ribs, breaking both of his wrists, and cracking his sternum and collarbone, with the injuries so severe that doctors gave him only a 50-50 chance of survival. Most actors would have taken months off to recover from such serious injuries, but Estrada had other plans that shocked everyone involved with the production. Rather than halt filming entirely or write his character out of episodes, the determined actor made an unprecedented decision to continue working from his hospital bed at UCLA Medical Center. The show's producers worked around his condition by bringing cameras, lighting equipment, and crew members directly into his hospital room, creating makeshift scenes that could be filmed while he remained bedridden and connected to medical equipment. The hospital scenes weren't just quick cameos or brief appearances either, as Estrada managed to deliver full dialogue and maintain his character's personality despite being in intensive care for 7 days. The production team had to be incredibly creative, writing scenes that made sense for Ponch to be lying down or recovering, and they even incorporated his real injuries into the show's storyline so viewers would understand why their favorite motorcycle cop was temporarily out of action. This unusual filming arrangement continued for several weeks as Estrada slowly recovered, with the actor refusing to let his physical condition completely derail the show's production schedule. The dedication paid off when he eventually returned to full duty, and MGM was so impressed with his commitment that they gifted him a $100,000 Rolls-Royce Corniche as a thank you gesture for his extraordinary efforts to keep the show going during such a difficult time. Fact 2. The show's guns were only drawn 3 times. In what might be the most surprising statistic about any police show in television history, CHiPS managed to run for 6 full seasons and 139 episodes, while having officers draw their weapons only 3 times during the entire series run. Even more remarkable is the fact that neither Eric Estrada's Ponch nor Larry Wilcox's John ever pulled their guns once throughout the show's duration, making CHiPS the only police series that can claim its main characters never drew their weapons on screen. The 3 instances where guns were actually drawn all involved the same supporting character, Officer Barry Barixa, played by Brody Greer, who found himself in genuinely dangerous situations that required him to reach for his weapon. One memorable scene occurred when Barixa faced off against a martial artist wielding nunchucks, with special guest star Danny Bonaduce delivering the attack that forced the officer to draw his Colt Python revolver in self-defense. Another incident happened during the episode called Peaks and Valleys, where criminals were shooting up Barixa's patrol car with a Thompson submachine gun and a shotgun, leaving him no choice but to respond with his own firearm. This incredibly low use of weapons wasn't an accident, but rather a deliberate, creative decision by the show's producers, who wanted to maintain a family-friendly atmosphere that would appeal to viewers during the 8 o'clock prime-time family hour. Eric Estrada himself explained this approach in interviews, saying the show was focused on helping pedestrians, people in trouble, the young kids who are straying, rather than creating violent confrontations that would require gunplay. The pacifist approach worked perfectly with the show's overall tone, as Ponch and John typically relied on their charm, wit, and reasoning skills to handle even the most difficult situations they encountered while patrolling the California highways. This unique characteristic made CHiPS stand out from other police dramas of the 1970s and 80s, which were often much more violent and serious in their approach to law enforcement storytelling. Fact 3. Mego toys suffered from zombie disease. The popular CHiPS action figures produced by Mego Corporation in 1981 became the source of one of the toy industry's strangest and most disturbing manufacturing problems, as the 8-inch Ponch and John figures began transforming from normal flesh-colored heads into sickly gray zombie-like appearances that collectors now refer to as zombie disease. This bizarre transformation occurred when the plastic used for the figures' bodies reacted chemically with the plastic bubble packaging, causing the heads to change color over time, from healthy skin tones to an unsettling grayish hue that made the action figures look like they had risen from the dead. Mego's quality control issues with the CHiPS line went beyond just the color change, as the company had cut costs by reusing molds from other toy lines, including repurposing Fonzie's motorcycle from their Happy Days collection and even borrowing Klingon boots from their Star Trek figures for the CHiPS characters. The chemical reaction that caused the zombie disease was particularly problematic because it happened gradually over months or years, meaning that children and collectors who bought the figures when they looked normal would later discover their beloved Ponch and John toys had transformed into creepy, discolored versions of themselves. The zombie disease problem was especially severe with the Eric Estrada figure, which toy collectors describe as becoming particularly disturbing due to the character's odd yellow eyes combined with the gray skin tone, creating an especially unsettling appearance that made the once attractive television heartthrob look genuinely frightening. What made this situation even more concerning was that collectors reported the discolored plastic was potentially toxic. Though the exact health risks were never fully documented by the company, this manufacturing disaster contributed to Mego Corporation's financial troubles during their final years, as parents and collectors became wary of purchasing toys that would deteriorate and potentially become unsafe over time. The CHiPS figures that managed to avoid the zombie disease are now considered rare finds at toy shows and collector events, while the gray-headed versions serve as cautionary examples of what happens when toy companies prioritize cost-cutting over quality control. Fact 4. Bruce Jenner replaced Estrada for 7 episodes. When Eric Estrada decided to go on strike at the beginning of CHiP's 5th season in 1981 over a dispute about syndication profits, the show's producers found themselves in a panic and needed to find a replacement quickly to keep their popular series on the air. In what seemed like an inspired casting decision at the time, they turned to Olympic gold medalist Bruce Jenner, who had won the decathlon at the 1976 Summer Olympics and was already working as a commentator for NBC Sports, making him a natural fit for the network's needs. Jenner's background made him an ideal temporary replacement for Estrada, since he already had experience with motorcycles and possessed the athletic ability and all-American image that the show required for its California Highway Patrol officers. The producers created a new character called Officer Steve McLeish, specifically for Jenner, and he stepped into the role with the kind of confidence and physical presence that came from his years of elite athletic competition and his growing television career. The Olympic champion appeared in 7 episodes during Estrada's absence, working alongside Larry Wilcox's John Baker character, while the show's writers and producers hoped that Jenner might become a permanent addition to the cast if Estrada's contract dispute couldn't be resolved. Jenner brought his own brand of charisma to the role, and his real-world athletic achievements gave the character an authenticity that resonated with viewers who were familiar with his Olympic success. However, The temporary arrangement came to an end when Estrada and MGM eventually reached an agreement about his compensation and syndication rights, allowing the original Ponch to return to the series. Once Estrada came back to work, Jenner's character was gradually phased out of the show, with Officer Steve McLeish disappearing from the storylines as the producers focused on restoring the original Ponch and John partnership that had made CHiPS such a success in the first place. Fact 5. The cast donated blood for real CHP officers. In October of 1981, the connection between CHiPS and the real California Highway Patrol became deeply personal when two actual CHP officers were seriously injured while performing their duties on the dangerous highways that the fictional Ponch and John patrolled every week on television. When news of the officers' critical conditions reached the cast and crew of CHiPS, they immediately recognized that this was their opportunity to give back to the real-life heroes who inspired their popular television series. The entire cast of the show, including Erik Estrada, Larry Wilcox, and the supporting actors, made the decision to take time away from their busy filming schedule to visit local blood donation centers and hospitals where they could contribute directly to the medical care of the injured officers. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a staged event for the cameras, but rather a genuine gesture of solidarity and support from the actors who portrayed fictional highway patrol officers to the real men who risked their lives every day protecting California's motorists. The blood donation drive organized by the CHiPS cast members demonstrated the deep respect and connection they felt toward the actual California Highway Patrol, whose officers had served as consultants and advisors throughout the show's production to ensure that the series portrayed law enforcement work with accuracy and dignity. The cast understood that their television careers were built on the foundation of real officers' dedication and sacrifice, and they wanted to do something meaningful to help during this crisis. Tragically, despite the medical efforts and the blood donations from the cast and many others in the community, only one of the two injured officers survived his injuries, making the gesture both a moment of hope and a sobering reminder of the real dangers faced by the men and women who work in law enforcement. The surviving officer's recovery was aided by the donated blood, and the entire incident created a lasting bond between the fictional world of CHiPS and the real California Highway Patrol that continued throughout the show's remaining seasons. Fact 6. Larry Wilcox saved Estrada's life. Despite their well-documented feuds and personal conflicts behind the scenes, Larry Wilcox became a real-life hero when Erik Estrada suffered his devastating motorcycle accident during filming, with Wilcox's quick thinking and medical knowledge literally saving his co-star's life in those critical first moments after the crash. When Estrada was thrown from his heavy motorcycle and began bleeding internally with a punctured lung, Wilcox was the first person to reach him at the accident scene, immediately recognizing the severity of the situation and the urgent need for medical intervention. Wilcox's ability to respond effectively came from his military training and combat experience, as he had served 13 months in Vietnam as a Marine artilleryman before becoming an actor, giving him first-hand knowledge of how to handle traumatic injuries and keep wounded people alive until professional medical help could arrive. When he reached Estrada, who was turning blue from his punctured lung and losing consciousness from internal bleeding, Wilcox drew on his wartime experience to assess the situation and take immediate action. The most crucial part of Wilcox's life-saving intervention was his decision to keep Estrada conscious and alert by holding his hand and forcing him to maintain eye contact and focus on his face, preventing him from slipping into unconsciousness that could have been fatal given the severity of his internal injuries. Wilcox understood that keeping trauma victims awake and responsive was essential for their survival, especially when dealing with serious chest injuries that affected breathing and circulation. Estrada later credited Wilcox with saving his life during those terrifying minutes before the California Highway Patrol helicopter arrived to transport him to UCLA Medical Center, where he would spend 7 days in intensive care recovering from his injuries. The incident created a lasting bond between the two actors that transcended their professional disagreements, as Estrada recognized that his co-star had literally kept him alive through his quick thinking, medical knowledge, and refusal to let him give up during those critical moments when his life hung in the balance. Fact 7. Estrada inspired the village people's cop costume. Erik Estrada's iconic look as Officer Ponch Poncharello had a surprisingly direct influence on one of the most famous musical groups of the late 1970s, as Victor Willis of the Village People reportedly took specific inspiration from Estrada's extra-tight California Highway Patrol uniform when creating his own cop character for the disco group. According to TV Guide, Willis was so impressed by the way Estrada's form-fitting uniform showcased his physique and created such a striking visual presence on CHiPS that he decided to adopt a similar style for his own police officer persona in Village People. The connection between CHiPS and the Village People makes perfect sense when you consider that both were products of the same era and were designed to appeal to audiences who appreciated attractive men in uniforms, though they were targeting very different demographics and entertainment formats. Estrada's portrayal of Ponch had already made him a sex symbol and heartthrob by the time the Village People were developing their distinctive look. With his tight-fitting tan uniform, aviator sunglasses, and confident swagger, creating a template for what a sexy police officer could look like in popular culture. Willis's decision to model his Village People costume after Estrada's CHiPS uniform shows how influential the television series had become in shaping popular perceptions of law enforcement officers, transforming the traditional image of police from stern authority figures into attractive, approachable characters who could appeal to a broad audience. The Village People's cop character became one of the most recognizable figures in the group's lineup, appearing in their hit songs and music videos, wearing the same style of tight-fitting police uniform that had made Estrada famous. This cross-pollination between television and music demonstrates how CHiPS had moved beyond just being a popular TV show to become a cultural phenomenon that influenced fashion, music, and entertainment across multiple industries. The fact that a disco group would specifically look to a police drama for costume inspiration shows just how much impact Estrada's portrayal of Ponch had on popular culture during the late 70s. Fact 8. Wireless mic batteries were hidden in holster belts. One of the most observant details that sharp-eyed CHiPS viewers noticed throughout the series was the presence of small rectangular pouches positioned behind the holsters on the officers' Sam Browne duty belts, which looked like they might be standard California Highway Patrol equipment, but were actually serving a completely different purpose for the television production. These mysterious pouches that appeared on every officer's belt throughout the show's 6-season run weren't part of any real CHP gear at all, but instead housed the battery packs for the wireless microphones that Erik Estrada, Larry Wilcox, and the other actors wore during filming. The decision to hide the microphone batteries in fake equipment pouches was a clever solution to a common problem that television productions faced during the late 1970s and early 80s, when wireless microphone technology was still relatively new, and the battery packs were much larger and more cumbersome than the tiny devices used in modern productions. The show's costume and technical departments had to find a way to conceal these bulky battery packs while maintaining the authentic look of California Highway Patrol uniforms, and the fake pouches provided the perfect cover. This creative approach allowed the actors to move freely on their motorcycles and during action sequences without having visible wires or obvious modern equipment that would break the illusion of the show's realistic setting, while also ensuring that their dialogue could be clearly recorded even during high-speed chase scenes and outdoor filming. The pouches were designed to look like they could plausibly be carrying police equipment such as citation books, emergency supplies, or communication devices that real highway patrol officers might need during their shifts. The battery pack solution was so effective that most viewers never questioned what the pouches were for, simply assuming they were part of the standard CHP uniform, and the detail has only become widely known among fans and trivia enthusiasts who have studied the show's production methods and behind-the-scenes technical requirements over the decades since it originally aired. Fact 9. Estrada had no motorcycle license during production. In one of the most shocking revelations about CHiPS that didn't come to light until decades after the show ended, Erik Estrada admitted in 2007 that he had never actually held a valid motorcycle license during the entire 6-year production of the series, despite spending countless hours riding Kawasaki police motorcycles on camera as Officer Ponch Poncharello. This stunning confession came when Estrada was preparing to appear on the reality television show Back to the Grind, which required him to obtain proper licensing for various activities, including motorcycle operation. The revelation became even more embarrassing when it was discovered that Estrada had to take the motorcycle licensing test 3 separate times before finally passing and receiving his official license more than 20 years after CHiPS had gone off the air. This means that throughout the show's entire run from 1977 to 1983, one of television's most famous motorcycle cops was technically riding without proper legal authorization, even though he had undergone an intensive 8-week motorcycle training course before the series began filming. The fact that Estrada could spend years performing motorcycle stunts and riding scenes for a show about highway patrol officers without having the basic legal requirement that any ordinary citizen would need to operate a motorcycle on public roads highlights just how different the world of television production was from real-world regulations. The show's insurance companies, legal departments, and production supervisors apparently never required proof of his motorcycle license, or simply assumed that someone playing a motorcycle cop would naturally have the proper credentials. This situation becomes even more ironic when you consider that CHiPS was often praised for its realistic portrayal of California Highway Patrol procedures and its attention to authentic law enforcement details, yet its main star was essentially an unlicensed motorcycle operator throughout the entire series. The revelation also adds another layer to the already impressive story of Estrada's dedication to learning motorcycle skills, specifically for the role, since he had to master riding techniques without going through the normal licensing process that teaches safety and traffic laws. Fact 10. The show was renamed CHiPS Patrol in syndication. When CHiPS completed its 5th season and was sold into syndication in the fall of 1982, MGM made what seemed like a logical decision at the time, but resulted in one of television history's most unintentionally hilarious naming mistakes. The studio decided to retitle the syndicated reruns as CHiPS Patrol to help viewers distinguish between the older episodes running in syndication and the new episodes that were still airing on NBC during the show's 6th and final season. The problem with this seemingly clever solution was that the people making the decision apparently forgot what the original title actually stood for, creating a redundant name that would have made English teachers everywhere cringe. Since CHiPS was already an acronym for California Highway Patrol, adding the word patrol to the end created the absurdly repetitive title California Highway Patrol, which essentially meant the same thing was being said twice in the same name. This embarrassing oversight managed to slip past multiple levels of television executives, marketing departments, and legal teams at MGM, all of whom presumably approved the new syndication title without anyone stopping to think about what it actually meant when spelled out in full. The redundant name appeared on television listings, promotional materials, and syndication packages that were distributed to local television stations across the country, spreading the linguistic mistake far and wide. The CHiPS Patrol title remained in use throughout the syndication run during the 1980s, meaning that millions of viewers saw this redundant name in their TV guides and on-screen graphics, without most people realizing the mistake that had been made. Later, syndication packages eventually reverted to the original CHiPS title, once the show had been off the air long enough that there was no longer any confusion between new and old episodes. But the Patrol era remains a perfect example of how corporate decisions can sometimes overlook the most basic details. Fact 11. Poncherello was originally going to be Italian. The iconic character that would eventually become Frank Poncherello almost had a completely different ethnic background, as the show's creators originally envisioned him as an Italian-American officer named Poncherelli, before Eric Estrada's explosive audition changed everything about the character's identity and cultural representation on television. The producers had written the part with a traditional Italian surname and were likely planning to cast an Italian-American actor to play the role, which would have given CHiPS a very different dynamic and missed out on one of the most important Latino characters in television history. Estrada's audition became legendary, not for his smooth delivery or professional composure, but rather for a moment of pure frustration that actually convinced the producers he was perfect for the role, despite his obvious mistake. When Estrada flubbed a line during his reading, he became so angry with himself that he punched a door in the audition room, displaying the kind of raw emotion and intensity that the producers apparently found more compelling than a technically perfect performance. Rather than being put off by this unprofessional outburst, the show's creators saw something in Estrada's passionate reaction that made them reconsider their entire approach to the character, leading them to change not just the casting, but also the fundamental identity of who this highway patrol officer would be. They modified the surname from Poncherelli to Poncherello and reimagined the character as a Hispanic-American police officer, creating what Estrada later described as one of the first positive Latino role models in primetime television. This casting decision turned out to be groundbreaking for representation in television, as Estrada specifically requested that the character be portrayed as a Hispanic-American cop rather than another stereotypical Latino criminal or gang member that was common in 70s television. The change from Italian to Latino not only gave Estrada a career-defining role, but also provided Latino viewers with a heroic character they could identify with during a time when such positive representation was extremely rare on network television. Fact 12. They filmed on unopened freeways. The spectacular chase scenes and freeway crashes that made CHiPS famous were only possible because the production team discovered a perfect solution to the problem of filming high-speed action sequences without disrupting actual traffic or endangering real drivers on busy Los Angeles highways. The show's producers took advantage of the massive freeway construction boom happening in Southern California during the late 1970s and early 80s, using newly completed sections of interstate highways that had been finished by construction crews but not yet opened to public traffic. This unique filming opportunity meant that Ponch and John could race their motorcycles at full speed down perfectly paved, multi-lane freeways without a single car in sight, except for the vehicles being used in the specific scenes they were shooting. The first season relied heavily on the intersection of Interstate 210 and California State Route 2 in La Canada Flintridge, along with a short stretch of Highway 2, giving the production crew miles of empty asphalt to stage their elaborate car chases and motorcycle pursuits. The filming locations had to change constantly as California's Transportation Department opened new sections to the public, forcing the CHiPS crew to pack up their equipment and move to different unopened stretches of freeway throughout the Los Angeles area. For the second season, they moved 5 miles west to La Crescenta, California, using a section of Interstate 210 until that too was open to drivers. And then for seasons 3 through 5, they shifted another 10 miles west to the intersection of Interstate 210 and California State Route 118 in Sylmar. When that section finally opened to traffic, the production moved again to a short section of the 710 Long Beach Freeway in Long Beach, as well as a long stretch of Pershing Drive near Los Angeles International Airport, constantly staying one step ahead of the opening of new roads to the public. The only time the show filmed outside the Los Angeles area was for the episode Drive, Lady Drive, which used the Riverside International Raceway in Moreno Valley for its racing scenes. Fact 13. Tom Riley was arrested by real motorcycle cops. In one of the most ironic twists in television history, Tom Riley, who had replaced Larry Wilcox as Erik Estrada's new partner in CHiPS' sixth and final season, found himself on the wrong side of the law when he was arrested in December of 1982 by real motorcycle police officers for suspected driving under the influence of drugs. The 23-year-old actor, who played Officer Bobby "Hot Dog" Nelson and had beaten out approximately 1,800 other actors for the role, was pulled over and arrested by actual California Highway Patrol officers in what became a media sensation due to the obvious irony of the situation. The arrest created a public relations nightmare for CHiPS and NBC, as news outlets had a field day with the story of a fake motorcycle cop being busted by real motorcycle cops, with headlines practically writing themselves about the actor who portrayed a law enforcement officer being arrested by the very type of officers he played on television. United Press International and other major news services picked up the story, making it national news and bringing unwanted attention to a show that was already struggling with declining ratings after Larry Wilcox's departure. The timing of Riley's arrest couldn't have been worse for the show, coming during the final season when CHiPS was trying to rebuild its audience and prove that it could survive without the original Ponch and John partnership that had made the series successful. The arrest also highlighted the ongoing problems behind the scenes, as reports indicated that Riley had already fallen out of favor with Erik Estrada by the end of the season, creating tensions similar to what had existed between Estrada and Wilcox. Following his arrest, Riley pleaded innocent to the charges, but the damage to his career and the show's reputation was already done. The incident contributed to the decision to reduce his role in the remaining episodes, and CHiPS was ultimately cancelled at the end of that season, bringing the series to an end with this embarrassing scandal hanging over its final months on the air. Fact 14. Chris Pine's birth was written into the show. One of the most unexpected connections between CHiPS and modern Hollywood came about when actress Gwynne Guilford, who played Betty Getrayer, the wife of Sergeant Joe Getrayer on the show, became pregnant during the series' production, and the writers decided to incorporate her real-life pregnancy into the show's storyline. The pregnancy subplot appeared in the episode called Satan's Angels, where viewers watched as Betty and Joe Getrayer anxiously awaited the arrival of their next child, with the fictional couple's excitement mirroring the real anticipation that Guilford and her husband were experiencing in their personal lives. What makes this seemingly routine example of television writing accommodating an actor's real-life situation so remarkable is that the baby Gwynne Guilford was carrying during the filming of that CHiPS episode would grow up, become Chris Pine, one of Hollywood's biggest movie stars and the actor who would eventually play Captain James T. Kirk in the rebooted Star Trek films. This means that future audiences watching Chris Pine command the USS Enterprise in movies like Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond were actually seeing someone who had technically appeared on CHiPS before he was even born. The writer's decision to work Guilford's pregnancy into the show, rather than trying to hide it or write her character out of episodes, created an unintentional piece of television history, as Chris Pine's prenatal appearance on CHiPS represents one of the earliest connections between the classic 70s cop show and the next generation of Hollywood actors. Guilford, who was already an established actress, with credits in shows like The Rockford Files and movies like Beware, The Blob, continued working throughout her pregnancy, allowing the CHiPS production to maintain continuity with her character. The fact that a routine accommodation for a pregnant actress on a motorcycle cop show would eventually connect to one of the biggest science fiction franchises in movie history shows how unpredictable and interconnected the entertainment industry can be across different decades and genres. Fact 15. The co-stars genuinely hated each other. Despite their convincing on-screen chemistry as best friends and motorcycle patrol partners, Larry Wilcox and Erik Estrada had one of the most bitter feuds in television history, with their mutual dislike becoming so intense that it ultimately destroyed the show's original dynamic and contributed to its eventual cancellation. The depth of their animosity became crystal clear in 1980 when Wilcox got married and made the deliberate decision not to invite Estrada to his wedding, later telling People magazine, in brutally honest terms, that Erik was not his best chum and never will be. Wilcox's public comments about his co-star revealed the extent of their personal and professional conflicts, as he openly criticized the decision to cast Estrada in the first place, saying he thought it was asinine to pick someone just for being photogenic, and describing their relationship problems as an ego problem that made it impossible for them to develop any kind of friendship. The veteran actor, who had served in Vietnam as a Marine, clearly resented what he saw as preferential treatment given to Estrada by the show's producers and network executives. The feud had been simmering since the very beginning of the series, with both actors arguing constantly on set, and their conflicts eventually spilling over into the entertainment media, where they would make disparaging comments about each other in interviews and public appearances. Wilcox complained that Erik and he were just totally different human beings, and that he couldn't get a good relationship going with his co-star, while also noting that their arguments had been ongoing ever since the show began. The toxic relationship between the two leads created such an uncomfortable working environment that Wilcox ultimately decided he could no longer tolerate the situation and chose to leave CHiPS before the 6th season rather than continue working with Estrada. This decision effectively ended the Ponch and John partnership that had been the heart of the show's appeal, leading to declining ratings and the series' cancellation after just one more season without the original duo.